Welcome to this week's Rob's Country. We're going to be looking at the Farmers Mill in Timaru this week, plus also an update on veggies and the dairy industry. And we've also got a little bit about a special event for Land's Bulldogs. But first of all, Neville, NZ dollar continues to rise, or to be on a high.
It is on a high, Rob, although it came back a little bit overnight, not near as much as the media would have us believe, about half a cent or something. So we're looking at 85.5, whereas, and what we used to complain about 60.
We did. We actually sat here on this program and go, what if it hits the high 60s?
Yes. And I think compounding this is the fact that the interest rates are going up. We've had the announcement that we've been expecting from the Reserve Bank. And the intimation that that's the first of several over the next year or so, and that's going to reinforce the higher dollar. So makes the New Zealand dollar more attractive, New Zealand investments more attractive to international investors. So that's going to keep our dollar up there, I think.
So that's what's supporting it.
One of the things, yeah. As I see it, at the same time, we've got commodity prices easing, or they're levelled, I should say, and they are certainly due to fall. They've had a long run of being high, and it has a cyclical pattern, so one assumes that they're due to go down sooner or later. So I see the prospects for the spendthrift farmer as being not too great right now.
You say spendthrift, you don't use that word lightly?
I don't, but then anyone who's on a narrow profit margin, and that's sadly a majority of farmers, is going to be squeezed, I think, just because of that combination of factors putting pressure on the returns that they're going to earn. And we need to recognise that farming is a very high-risk business. When we do a risk analysis, we have a look at risk at about 4 or 5 levels, starting off at a government level, not much of an issue there, although I'd have to say, in retrospect, the people who called MMP mini-muddled politicians were probably forecasting very accurately 10 or 15 years ago. So there is a small element of risk there. And then we look at the economic risk, and that's where we're looking at these things like the exchange rates and the strength of the New Zealand economy and things like that. And then we look at the industry risk, and farming is a high-risk industry because of the uncontrollability of the input conditions like weather, drought, rainfall, snows, you name it, we get them all, and that increases the risk levels of the business of farming quite substantially. And at the bottom of the pyramid of risk assessment, we've got financial risk. And this is where the guys who increase their debt loading cap it off, you might say, by just going one stage too far. They take on too much debt, out of proportion to what they can handle. Now, it wouldn't be bad, or it would be more manageable, if farming had a decent return on investment. But it damn well doesn't, and it hasn't done for pretty much forever, as long as I've ever looked at statistics. And I recall a notable study by the then National Bank Agricultural Research Division 10 or 15 years ago, where they commented very sadly at that time that correctly measured economic return on investment for farming was dismally low.
Well, I remember you were saying years ago that it was about sort of between 1% and 2% for most farmers.
That's the same study I'm referring to, Rob. That's the sort of figures they came out with. That was for sheep and beef, and dairy farming, from memory, was only about another 1.5% or 2% higher than that again.
I mean, you get 3.5 in the bank, or more.
Quite. And you haven't got the risk factors that I'm alluding to with farming. So there just isn't much margin for error, and with farm prices coming under threat, as I think they are, or are going to.
This is land prices you're talking about?
I'm talking about the prices for the sales of the produce from the farm.
Yep.
I think that we're seeing a trend here now Individual ownership is gradually disappearing. You've only got to look at the dairy industry, and what was that sale while I was away over the last couple of weeks, $64 million or something or other for a dairy farm. Not too many private individuals can step up and buy a farm like that, even if they mortgage themselves to the hilt. So I think there's a new era coming. We're looking at enforced corporate farming, and sooner or later reality is going to prevail. It needs to, it must.
Well, speaking of new eras, I'm just a wee bit sad that this is going to be your last visit to Rob's Country, and nearly 300 times you've come in and talked to us, because quite frankly, out of all the feedback I get, Mr. Neville Dodd, that you seem to be the one that people say, you know, I was just saying to my husband, why can't we have an accountant like Neville Dodd? So thank you very, very much indeed. It's been over 20 years since you started coming on, and I went round the building to see who else had been associated with CTV and Rob's Country for that long, and the only one I could find was Mary Ann. And we'd like you, because you don't drink whiskey, Neville, to receive on our behalf.
Thank you.
A very special little cherry cake.
From a very special lady, I might add.
Well, Mary Ann,
I cite you as the survivor, Mary Ann.
So
This
seriously,
is overwhelming.
on behalf of everybody at CTV, Rob's Country, and the 115,000 people who watch this program every weekend, thank you from the bottom of our hearts, Neville, and very, very, very safe and happy and long retirement, sir.
All the best, Rob. It's a great program. I hope you can keep it going.
Well, we will certainly do everything we possibly can, and you will always be remembered, buddy. After the break, we're going to be talking about law with Harmans. Welcome back to Rob's Country, and he will be missed, and he certainly didn't expect that to happen. Poor Neville, you'll never forgive me. In the meantime, though, I went down to Timaru and caught up with the guys at the Farmers Mill and asked, first of all, the history of it.
Well, Rob, look, basically it's the product of about 12 or 13 shareholders, of which all but one of them are actually local growers. And so they've been in this region for some time, all reasonably well accomplished and established in their own right. And I guess from my understanding anyway, because it all came about before I sort of arrived on the scene, but it was largely due to the fact that I think with a view to taking that product that's on farm to the point where they can do something with it a little bit more than just supply it as a commodity, and they build a flour mill.
So it's a wee bit about control.
I think it's about control, but I also think a lot of these guys are probably starting to understand in terms of that whole value chain, that the further down they can get that chain, then the better, or they can influence their returns, you know, right back to the paddock, I suppose.
So who is supplying the grain to them for the mill?
So the mill supplies, majority of it is supplied by the shareholder growers, although, and that was predominantly due with the fact that their largest contract is with Griffin's, their largest single contractor, which is a soft wheat. Predominantly South Canterbury lends itself well to those softer wheats, and that wheat's almost 100% or is 100% supplied by shareholders. Outside of that, though, the business has grown into milling wheats, and that's where we've been lucky in picking up the likes of Coupland's Bakeries, a French Bakery, Baker Boys, Rangiora Bakery, and those sort of names that in the South Island anyway, well established. As we've gone into those varieties, then there's been a need for milling and gristing grains. And of course, at that point, we've gone outside of that shareholder base and we offer contracts into the market for both milling and gristing varieties that really are attainable by any arable grower.
So basically it's almost niche, isn't it, really, for getting the grain in and supplying the flour?
Well, it's niche in the sense that it's all sourced in the South Island, and it's all sourced from New Zealand grown wheat, whereas I think the alternatives are, well, we know the alternatives are anyway, the mainstream ones are majority imported wheat, which is Australian by nature. So yes, it's niche in the sense that we are the only mill that is producing flour from 100% New Zealand grain.
As far as somebody wanting to get involved and wanting to supply, is that possible?
For sure, yes, supplying. Now, by default, we actually use the merchant base, so outside of our shareholder growers, we won't contract directly with people. It's a decision made by the board. Anyone wanting to supply the mill, all merchants have access to our contracts. We're no different than anybody else in that sense. We put out contracts once a year, and anyone wanting to supply the mill and be part of that story can contact any of the well-known merchants and to secure a contract.
And obviously you stack up, otherwise you wouldn't be having grain coming in.
Well, that's right. Grain in itself at that point is a commodity, and we are equivalent to the market at any point in time. So yeah, there's no disadvantage necessarily, other than the fact you can be part of a story that is something we're pretty proud of anyway.
It must be nice to have a whole lot of new gear.
I think so. Yeah, I'm not from the milling industry, but I know our miller work again. We've spent time and money bringing in the right people, I guess. We've got the shareholders well versed in growing the grain, but when it's come to the producing the flour and marketing the flour, we've picked up people that are well recognised within that industry, and certainly our miller here has been very happy to have state-of-the-art technology. It's only a year old, the mill, and that's probably been a big part of the attraction for him, and certainly something that allows him to be able to refine his craft a little bit better than perhaps he has been able to do with some of the technology that's been around to date.
And because you're small, your miller, for example, can talk to the guys who are at Couplands or wherever and say, how's it going? What else can we do?
Well, that's been one of the fascinating things for me. I'd spent sort of 12 years in that merchant side of the industry, and ironically now to have a miller talking directly to the grower and have our national sales and marketing manager all in the room at once means a couple of things. One, we can get the information we need back to the growers without necessarily any bias or confusion. And secondly, too, the size of the mill is such that, we can grist down to 30 tonnes. So if we want to do a flour that's perhaps customer specific or orientated directly to a market, well, that's quite feasible for us because we can actually talk to our growers, we can get that particular grain or variety produced, albeit it takes, 12 months in terms of the cycle. But then we can mill in a way that also lends itself to a smaller quantity or a smaller tonnage, and that's probably something that hasn't been necessarily available before too until now.
See, you are to this industry what a microbrewery is to the beer industry.
Well, to some degree that's right, yeah, because we have sort of brought a focus to it. As I say, we're 100% New Zealand grown, but we're also, at this stage anyway, largely focused on a very domestic market, and consciously so. And we can do a lot for those guys that perhaps they haven't seen. To be fair, the majority of the mills, or all the mills in New Zealand, have plant bakeries. And I guess it's a bit like, sort of Henry Ford, was it any colour as long as it's black? Well, a lot of those options for bakeries and that to date have been any flour they like, as long as it's a product of what's already being produced for mill-owned plant bakeries. Well, we don't have a plant bakery, so as a result of that, we can quite easily tailor a grist or a flour to a particular customer at no implication relative to any conflict we might have.
And you can look at a whole lot of different varieties to get something that the end user wants because you've got the ability to do that.
Well, that's what's sort of starting to happen now. This is our second year, this will be our second harvest, and some of the decisions that have been made now going into sowing for next year are being made in conjunction with our end customer and saying, well, look, if we were to produce a particular type of grain, what would you like to see in a flour? As a result of that, we're going back and we're looking at some of the grains that are being grown on farm, and where historically that would have been an equation of perhaps yield, what's the best thing for the grower. Well, these growers now own a flour mill, so yes, they're conscious of what might be required on farm, but they're also prepared to take a position that says, right, let's experiment with a crop that might not necessarily result in quite the yields that we would have liked, but if we can see that flow through to a benefit in our mill and through to a customer, well, we're prepared to try that.
They're listening.
Well, they are, yeah, and that's the thing I enjoy, to find that customers right back through to the grower is actually having that audience is now such that you get a very clear message.
Indeed, and as I said, they're listening to that message, and I guess it's all about control. In just a moment, though, it's Law with Harmons. Alan, insurance claims, there's a lot of people in the city watching, and there's also a lot of people who have got off-farm investments that have been watching as well. So where are we at with insurance claims?
Well, we're finally starting to see some insurance claims paid out, which is good. It's been a long time coming, but as is always the case with these sorts of things, you have to be a bit careful, because even though they're offering to pay you money, the insurance companies, you have to make sure that they're paying you the right amount of money and that you're not signing something that might prejudice you in the future when you actually get the money.
So you're suggesting that you don't take it as read, you take it to your lawyer?
It's very important to do that. Look, there are several things you have to consider, obviously. At the moment, insurance companies seem to be very keen on doing cash payouts rather than actually fixing the property.
Yep, or rebuilding it.
Or rebuilding it. There's certainly a move towards cash payments, and of course that brings a challenge to the client, because they have to make sure that the cash that's being paid out is going to be enough to either repair the building or replace it. So in the first instance, you don't necessarily accept what the insurance company says is the correct amount. You need to make sure that you're satisfied that the money that the insurance company is offering you is going to do the job, is going to respond to the policy.
We're obviously talking Christchurch and Canterbury, but this will become a template, no doubt, for the rest of the country?
Well, look, at Christchurch, because that's where all the insurance claims are being paid out at the moment, really. Not just earthquake claims, I might say. There's a few flood claims in recent times as well. And I guess in Canterbury, there's such a large volume of claims that's where we're really focusing. Around the rest of the country, claims are still being paid out, but it's much more one-on-one there. I guess we're having to deal with a big quantity of claims.
But once the insurance company finds out, Alan, that they can manipulate situations and not have to pay as much, other branches have got to do it as well.
There's certainly evidence out there that insurance companies are waiting till people really have to do a deal and then they're doing it. But even if you get to a point where you're accepting a cash offer, that's not the end of it, because for instance, there's a lot of people being paid out at the moment for what we call out-of-scope damage. So that's damage that's not covered by EQC. It's driveways, paths, etc. And they might be getting paid out that money by their insurance company, because it's the private insurers that cover that, EQC doesn't, before the house has been assessed or before the house claim's been settled. And what we're finding is that a lot of insurance companies are putting a clause in their agreement that they require you to sign before they pay this money out, saying that the settlement is in full and final settlement of all claims. The insurance companies I have a little trouble with them sometimes in this regard, because they're saying that they're only settling the out-of-scope claims, but the document that they produce, on the face of it, appears to settle all claims. So it's quite important. We've had to go back to insurance companies on a number of occasions and say, look, you have to take this clause out and change it to limit it to the out-of-scope claims only. And they do. They change it. But if you don't ask and you just sign it, then potentially, if you have your house go over the 100k EQC cap and go to the insurance company, they could potentially pull out this agreement that you've signed for your out-of-scope work and say, sorry, all settled, not going to get any more money from us. So it's very important that you go to the lawyer and just check to make sure that's all done properly.
In fact, what you're saying to me is you don't sign anything unless it's in front of your lawyer who's read it first.
I would say that, you know, if you're dealing with your insurance company, don't sign anything without first checking it with the lawyer.
Because every person you speak to who's got any damage or house being rebuilt, they've got stories. You know, they're going, oh my God, I can't believe that I've got to pay all my excesses plus the betterment, and the place is still standing, and why I have had to do that. Well, you signed it.
It's been interesting actually, because even though there are so many claims, almost every claim has its own story. They're all unique. There are different circumstances with almost every claim, and that's been something that I've been a bit surprised about as a lawyer, because we don't see that so often. I mean, when you're doing a house purchase or a house sale or something like that, then generally they all follow a pattern. But what we've found with insurance claims is that that's not necessarily the case, and individual circumstances actually have an effect in every different case. So,
and time frames, Alan, I mean, you must pull your hair out.
Yes, what little hair I've got left, Rob, yeah.
But you used to have a full hair.
I did, yes. You're right, it has taken a very long time for insurance companies to get to where they've got to now. And there's still, despite what the insurance companies say, a large amount of claims that have to be paid out. The hard claims still have to be paid out yet. The hard claims, they haven't got to those yet.
Okay, let's go back a couple of steps. And when people are signing an insurance agreement, I mean, basically you go to your broker or you go to your insurance company and say, look, I've got a house so big. How many people actually take that to their lawyer?
That, well, no one in my experience has done that. Certainly there's an additional challenge with houses now, and that the replacement sum has to be actually stipulated. In the old days, before the earthquakes, the insurance companies just covered your house for replacement, and if it fell down, they replaced it. Now, that's not the case anymore. Now they'll only replace your house up to the limit that you put on the policy. So there's that. And policy wording, no one ever looked at the policy wording before. I'm pretty sure there'll be people in Christchurch actually reading the policy wording now before they actually sign up for the insurance, just to see what's covered. Because, of course, the other loophole or minefield, if you like, is you're not necessarily covered when your house is rebuilt. Correct, yes. Certainly the terms of the policy wording that the insurance companies are putting out has changed, and it's changing continuously. And, it's important that when you do insure a property, you make sure you have a read of that policy wording to see what the cover actually is. We're quite vulnerable, aren't we? Well, yes, I guess. I mean, at least in New Zealand, we have the EQC land insurance or land cover, which isn't available anywhere else in the world. So that's a plus. But yes, I mean, it's like any business transaction, I guess. You're entering into a contract with the insurance company, and the terms of that contract are set out in the policy wording. So really, you should be looking at that contract pretty carefully before you enter into it, because in the end, that's what you're going to be paid out on if there's a problem. And that's what we say to the insurance companies. They are trying to, in some cases, not abide by the terms of the contract they had pre-earthquake, and we're saying, well, no, that's not, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Here's the contract, the policy wording, you must do it. Thank God for lawyers, is all I can say, Alan. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there's a lot of characters do a lot of things, and Vintage Tractors is one, and there's a special event looming large. Well, Bulldog tractors are something that many, many New Zealanders have either driven, watched or still own, and it's a huge day next weekend, 29th and 30th of March at the Ellesmere ANP Showgrounds, because the guys at Miller Tractors and a few other enthusiasts have got together and they want to beat a record of the most Bulldog tractors at one spot at one time. The record was set in 1988 at the Winchester Showgrounds, when the locals down there got 33 of them. Well, the idea is that they're going to want to get at least 40, if not more, Lands Bulldogs at the Ellesmere ANP Showgrounds. As I said, 29th and 30th of March. It's not just that, though. There's going to be a lot of steam engines and a whole lot of other vintage machinery as well. And, of course, whenever you get a collection of these sorts of tractors and those sorts of machines, you've got a huge collection of characters. There'll be a lot of old photographs available to have a look at, plus there's lots of contests. Start-up contests, which those of you who know anything about a Lands Bulldog knows you don't just flick a switch, not in the old ones, you can in the newer ones, but the old ones, it's the heating up the bits and all the little blow torches and the rest of it, so that will be interesting. There's a lot of other different contests that have never been done before. Some of the history totally intrigues me. For example, I understand that there's very, very, very few of them left in Europe, mainly because during the Second World War the Nazis decided that they were full of lead, brass and steel, and so the authorities went round to the dealers and quietly got a list of those who owned Lands Bulldogs and went and took them over and melted them down as brass, lead and steel. Another lovely story is a Romanian peasant who owned one and buried it for 55 years because he didn't want to get the communists to take control of his tractor. After 55 years, the communists lost their power and the Romanian peasant dug up his Lands Bulldog. Some of the bits had been kept in his house, but the rest of it had been buried for 55 years, put it together, cleaned it all up, and it is still running to this day as his everyday tractor. Bulldogs on numbers that hopefully will collect more than 40.
let's just say we need more than 40 Lands Bulldogs plus a lot of other things. Ellesmere ANP show at the 29th and 30th of March. That's about next weekend. It'll be a huge time for, even if you don't want to look at the machinery, just go along and meet the characters. Because there'll be a huge number of them. We've got a veggie update straight after the break. Welcome back to Rob's Country. I like to keep up with what's going on around the place season-wise, and this week it's the veggies with Robin Oakley.
Yes, it's been a good old interesting season, isn't it? We've had hail before Christmas, which was reasonably destructive on some of our crops, and then we had this last sort of hail we had before we had the flooding in town. But the 50 mils of rain we had here was quite welcomed. It was dry, and so it set things up good now for getting in and harvesting potatoes, and saves us having to pre-water ground to transplant broccoli into. So the rain's been welcome, and then we were just, oops, the old spider's having fun today. The 35 mils of rain we've just had, that'll slow the spud digging down for a day or three, but we've had enough for now.
But you've got some sunshine now, I mean, it's got to be good.
Oh yes, nothing like a good bloody sunny day after a rain, isn't it? Yeah.
So what's the wish list weather-wise from now for the rest of autumn?
I would say no more rain. Lots of sunshine, not too much wind. No, we want to get the potatoes out now, so if we can get some nice weather for that. Cloudy days are nice, and we don't want any early frosts. We want to get the pumpkins off in a month's time, so 3 or 4 weeks' time. So,
With the potatoes coming out, you're able to store them in bins until you need them?
yes, they'll all be dug and into bins, and some of them are going straight into the pack house, and quite a few of them are going to storage so that we can control the quality of the potatoes and supply them through till the next season comes through.
You're doing your niche marketing of the little ones and the middle-sized ones in boxes. How's that working?
Yes, it's going very good. People are interesting things. They know when they're onto a good thing, and we've found with the Golden Gourmets that they're pretty much selling themselves now, and people are coming in and just going straight to them and picking them up, and you go in there and talk to the odd person and just sort of query why did you go and pick it? Why did you pick that particular box of potatoes? And it's all about the taste. They like the taste of them.
And the other thing is that they're dark in there, so you're not going to go green.
Oh, that's for sure. There's a lot of people commenting, and I've had feedback before around with the box. They fit in the pantry really nicely, and they're fully enclosed. They're not going to green, so it's a good way of keeping.
And you've got recipes in there.
Oh yes, got the recipes under the lid. So I haven't caught up with how many people have followed those, but they're proper recipes. They do work, and they're nice and simple, and they're tried and tested at home. So they're favourites.
What about all the other produce that you're making? Has it been good and solid all the way through?
Yeah, we've had a good season so far on broccoli, although everyone can expect broccoli prices in the stores to go up for the next, I would say at least the next 2 weeks.
Is that because of harvesting?
No, it's more around the rain we had last Christmas. So we get to this time of the year in this particular area in Canterbury where the growing days stretch out, and we need to get some significant plantings in around and just after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year. And of course, those that can recall back to their Christmas break, it was very wet, so those plants didn't go in the ground. So we're expecting at least a week to 2 weeks gap on production, and so it's going to be supply and demand, so price is going to go up.
The vulnerability for you must be terrifying.
Oh, you just get used to it. It's just what we deal with all the time. So, if you stop and think about it too hard, I think you'd probably stop doing it.
Size matters, as far as production is concerned?
I don't think it matters quite as much as it used to matter. Bigger is better. I don't think that really applies. You need to be big enough. You need to have enough scale to justify the equipment to do certain jobs to a high standard, but after that I think what's most important is that you can consistently deliver the quality in the product to meet the consumer demands, and being on a bigger scale doesn't necessarily make you better at that, and ultimately that's what is required. So
And you've got a pretty good team of people now, haven't you?
Oh, a good team of people, but it's like all workplaces. People come and go for various reasons, and there's always new people having to come in and be trained up and put into positions, and we've got a few of those this year, and so far that's working very well.
I mean, you're well out of town. You're not far from Leeston or Southbridge, but is that a problem getting people to get here?
You would expect it would be, but there seems to be a steady number of people knocking on the door that holiday workers with holiday visas, and while they might only be here for a shorter period of time, we find that those people are good quality people to have come door knocking, and they're very welcome to this time of the year where we have an increased seasonal demand. So you've got people that have got the gummy to go overseas and have a look around, and they're quite motivated, and they've got a reason why they're working, and when they're working they're enjoying it and mixing with the other people, and they fit into the team really well, so they're very welcome and fit in well.
And how often do you hear in this program people saying that the staff make the difference? After the break, some facts and figures which you may not want to hear, but you've got to listen to. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Variation 1.
Oh yes, Variation 1 has been out in the Environment Canterbury Press for a little while now, about a month I think, and submissions close on that tomorrow night at 5 p.m. So you'll have gone to air by the time people listen to this, and have realised that.
Friday,
Yep, so that's Friday, and they will have listened to this and suddenly realised, oh,
too late.
Something else. I'm too late. And if they've been vigilant and keeping up to date with things and listening to people talk about Variation 1, and I have mentioned it before on the program, they'll be aware that there's things in Variation 1 that will affect the way in which they are going to farm as of January the 1st this year.
That's Schedule 24.
Well, Schedule 24 is just one part of Variation 1. There's lots of things in Variation 1 that affect other areas. For example, in the Selwyn Te Waihora area, there's a lot of emphasis being placed on nutrients, a lot of emphasis being placed on cultural and environmental zones. In fact, the entire boundary of Lake Ellesmere now, and there's a map delineating what that is now a cultural and environmental zone that will predominantly shut down any development in that area at all. Inclusion of, for example, areas on Banks Peninsula in the groundwater zone of Selwyn Waimakariri. It's interesting to try and figure out how basalt groundwater, for example, is connected to gravel aquifers out on the plains, but that's a decree they've made in Variation 1. So there's a lot of other things besides Schedule 24 and the way in which farming activities are going to be governed in the future.
Tell me some of the mines in the minefield.
Well, Schedule 24 starts with nutrient management. That's number one on the book, and that's all about overseer modelling for the property. So that's going to have to be done on a regular basis, and it's going to have to meet minimum requirements. Somehow, the minimum is 15 kilograms of nitrogen per 15 kilograms of nitrate per hectare.
Per hectare, yep.
Per hectare. Yep. That's been raised from the proposed land and water plan, which is sort of a little bit of a coup, I guess. But it's still got to be dealt with under the terms of the overseer modelling, and that's a long way from being a model that gives you confident numbers. It's really a guideline.
We're going to see destocking, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, 15 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year is very difficult to achieve under any intensive pastoral operation, and in many cases under any intensive arable operation. So that's going to be something that's going to be quite difficult to achieve.
Monitoring?
Monitoring, well, besides everything you're going to have to do for nutrient management, for example, knowing exactly when you put on fertiliser, how much you put on, ensuring that was put on by a certified spreader or a spreader that you have done all the QA on according to some rules and regulations or guidelines from the Fertilisers Association. There's new rules around irrigation management, for example, and if I can be excused to
of course,
being
no,
able
please,
to read.
please do, because you've got to get it right.
Yep. For example, for irrigation systems that are installed after the 1st of January 2014, then it's got to meet the Irrigation New Zealand standards for piped systems, the system design standards, and the Irrigation New Zealand piped irrigation installation guidelines standards, code of practice. So it's not about any longer just going out and putting some more pipe in the ground and putting another irrigator on. You'll have to have those, first of all, a design. It will have to be installed according to those
Regulations and
regulations or codes of practice. That irrigation has to be undertaken according to property-specific soil moisture monitoring, or a soil water budget, or an irrigation scheduling calculator of some sort. And you will have to keep records of the irrigation system depths that you put on, the uniformity of your irrigator, the irrigation applications, the soil moisture monitoring. All those things are going to have to be kept records of. The irrigator needs to be self-checked according to an Irrigate piece of software, which is a check on uniformity, and that has to be done once a year. There's a whole lot of things just about irrigation that have not been done in the past that are going to have to be done in the future for you to be able to operate under the permitted activity status.
Very briefly, there's an arable hook in there as well.
There is an arable hook in there. There's cultivation rules now that you cannot cultivate closer than 2 metres to a water body, whether that be a stream. I guess this includes a drain that might be taking water away that ends up in a stream, a lake, a wetland. So you've got to have a 2 metre strip that's vegetated between your cultivated area and the edge of the river, edge of the water body.
Tony, I don't know whether to thank you or not, but I will thank you. Yeah, so it's just 2 metres or 6 feet of where the aphids can breed. Another subject, though, is the South Island, Lincoln University Dairy Unit now caught up to find out what sort of a season they've had so far.
Yeah, no, she's been reasonably good. Grass growth's certainly been a bit lower than other seasons on average, so we have had to feed a bit more supplement out this season.
Is that because of the temperatures or because you've had a bit of rain?
Yeah, no, we've had the moisture this year. We've done a lot less irrigation, but on the whole, it's been a cold summer. It hasn't really been a great summer this season, and that's affected soil temperatures. So soil temperatures have been 1.5 to 2 degrees lower on average through the season.
Yeah, you can put water on, but you can't get it to heat up, can you?
No, you can't.
So what's been happening? You've obviously had mating.
Yes, mating's all been and done. We've done our 10-week mating period. We did 6 weeks of AI, 4 weeks natural mating. We actually had quite a good success rate this year. We had 78% of the cows and calved AI, which is meeting Dairy NZ Industries targets, so that's quite pleasing.
And as far as production, how was that, even though you said it was pretty tough?
Yep, we're exactly the same as last year, so we're on target, producing about 480 a cow and about sort of 1850 a heat year.
But you would have liked to have gone a wee bit better than last year, no doubt.
Oh, definitely, always want to do better, yes.
So what happens next? I mean, you've got to basically heading towards the end of the season.
Yep, just pretty much matching growth to cow demand now. We've dropped a few cows have gone already, so we've fed quite a bit of supplement out this year, so we're going to restrain ourselves to how much supplement we feed through the autumn going forward, so we'll just be matching cows to feed demand really going forward.
How do you pick which cows you're going to carry on doing 2 milkings and the others you drop back to 1?
Yep, well obviously we have our goals for we're already thinking about next season, so we're thinking about cow condition at calving next season, so to achieve that we have to make some goals this time of year. So our once a day herd now is all our early calving cows next year that are low condition score.
And so you're concentrating on getting stuff down their throat?
Oh yes, so that's the plan, is we're trying to get them into sort of a good condition to dry off at, so they don't have to put too much on over the winter.
bit of an Indian summer today, Pete. Is the grass still working?
Yeah, no, it's still trying to grow. It's been a funny year. We've been measuring a lot more of our rising plate meter than what the cows have actually been finding. So, and that's probably the duller overcast days. The dry matter in the grass probably what it has been lower this year. So, all those things have quite an impact on the demand, the available feed.
And of course, the other thing is just everyday sort of stuff. You're keeping your costs down still.
Yep. No. To date, season costs are looking pretty good. We're below budget on a lot of things. So, yeah, we are holding costs this year.
And supplementary feed. If you've been feeding a lot out, you're going to have to get a lot more in.
Yeah. We had quite a good buffer this year, knowing that this year we aim to use a lot less nitrogen than other seasons. So we did have a buffer of silage, so we've got plenty of silage up our sleeve, but whether we feed it all out, we probably won't.
You're still mowing in front of the cows?
Not at present. We haven't done quite as much this season. We've only done about 340 hectares in front of the cows this year, so about half of what we did last year. Once again, that's a reflection of not having a lot of surplus grass. So, with the less nitrogen and the cooler weather we've had, we haven't grown as much. So, definitely, not as much as other seasons.
So this season, basically, you can't throw anything more at you, really. You just about wrap it up.
Well, we've done what we can to this, just the glide to the end of the season there. Yep.
And perhaps a game of golf before the next season starts.
Yeah, get days like this would be good.
Yeah, chances of him getting a day with a game of golf in it would be pretty remote. After the break, it's Federated Farmers and Bees. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Bees, I guess it's put them to bed and tuck them up and leave them there for the winter almost now, is it?
Well, I think probably we've been tucking them up now for the last month because the season's been pretty much a disaster for the greater New Zealand across most regions, apart probably from the west coast to the North Island, and production's down, I would say, on average in excess of 40%.
Ooh.
So
weather?
Very much weather related. We had a good run until Christmas, as did all the farming and horticultural community, agriculture. But come the new year with the cold winds that were affecting a lot of the east coast of New Zealand, and of course the challenges on the west coast are always there. So in all the seasons been well below average, and it will cause some challenges as we move into this export season.
I was going to say, I mean, if you're 40% down, that's a lot of contracts you can't fill.
Correct. Well, last year was our largest export year ever in the honey industry. $170 million worth of product was exported out of New Zealand. When you add another 50 million from the domestic market plus the pollination revenue, we had a pretty good year. This year, the complete opposite's going to happen, and we'll probably find even our domestic supply slightly challenged towards the end of the year unless there's some real control put on how much product's released to the market over the next 9 or 10 months.
The obvious question is, how do you control that, John?
Well, there's only one mechanism, and it's the same mechanism that everybody uses, and that's price.
Yeah.
And as frustrating as that may be, it will be a necessity this year to ensure that we do stretch the product out and to make sure that the consumer has that option right throughout the year.
So obviously, if it's 40% down, and you said the pollination was down, that will affect crops, do you think? I mean, we're going into harvest
a lot of the
now.
crops in the small seed sector, the word is that they've had a reasonably good set, and the same with kiwi fruit this year. The word is they've had a very good set. They were most concerned about Cyclone Lucy whistling into the Bay of Plenty, but fortunately I think it hasn't done the damage that it could have, because there was a lot of fruit on the vines, and they were concerned about damage there. The small seed sector have had a reasonably positive pollination period, and I think a lot of that probably pre-Christmas.
I was just going to say, that's because it was when the season was okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, so what would you like to see happen? A lot of people plant tree lucerne, I suppose.
Well, I mean, of course, we're still going through those massive challenges, and certainly in the mid-Canterbury region now, where we have these large swaths of monocultural farming. We've either got the cows or the large arable areas now. Obviously not a lot of suitable pollen resource for the honeybee, and in a lot of instances no nectar resource either, so quite challenging. I'm certainly in mid-Canterbury, those people that are heavily involved in pollination, certainly the hives coming out of that, out of the pollination crops, the carrots and the onions and the beets, etc. they're not in great shape. They get beaten up pretty badly because the pollen nutrition's low. The bees are there, but they don't really want to be there. But when you have that type of agriculture going on now, with the large areas of single source activity, there's nothing else for them to do anyhow, so they go and do the job. But certainly
they prefer to do something else.
Yeah, they do. If there's a choice, they'll fly over the fence and do something else.
It's lovely to hear Ray Main, who's an irrigation guy down in Ashburton, saying we've got to plant trees again. We've got to plant trees. So there is hope in the horizon.
It always staggered the beekeeping community, and I guess a lot of the forebearers of Canterbury, when they watched all these shelter belts being ripped away, and I think there's a growing reality now that really we do need them back. We just need to be smart in what we plant.
I mean, even gorse fences would have supplied a bit of...
Well, the gorse fences were a fantastic resource for the beekeeping community. Yeah. Not only did it provide a great and a really high-value pollen as a protein, but it also provided the flying pathways which bees could track along so they didn't get blown away in the northwest winds. So, you know, there was multiple functions for them.
Yeah, but, you know, they've mainly all gone now.
Not many there now, no,
exactly.
Much as we had discussed.
Exactly. And of course, the question is what happens over winter, because they do need to be fed and you have to buy in sugar and such.
Yeah, so this year will be very challenging. Most beekeepers will extract their product, what little they have, simply because obviously the price is a determining factor, and it'll certainly has risen already in the marketplace because demand from there, particularly our Asian export markets, remains very strong. They simply seem to want to pay the price. If the price goes up, they just keep paying. So that drives that economy from the honey production. And yes, we will have to look at supplement feeding for this autumn period as we shut those hives down.
And it's expensive.
Well, it's expensive, not so much in the fact that you're using a sugar to do it, but the time and effort and energy that's involved in
for the beekeeper
doing that whole exercise.
John, thank you very much indeed. Federated Farmers number and others you'll want to jot down on your screen now. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed Rob's Country, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.